This is Van Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air for the first time with Lynita Mitchell-Blackwell. Thank you for being on the Van Electric Ghost podcast. How are you doing tonight?
I'm so good, Phantom. Thanks for having me tonight. Let's do this.
I want to thank you again for being on the podcast, and want to let people know that we're actually, we've been on the air for a while, since 2016, and we're actually at episode 987 of the podcast. We've been on the air since 2016, tracking that on Apple Podcast. We're getting closer to episode 1000. And then we want to let people know that we've got your website up for those listening, LynitaMitchell-Blackwell.com/books. That'll be fully clickable as a URL when we're published on all the platforms that we're on. But for those of you listening, that's the LynitaMitchell-Blackwell.com/books. Now, if somebody clicks on that link, what do they see at that URL?
They will see all of the books that I've published. So my latest one, Live Life on Fire, which was here on my right. And it's all its versions. So Audible, Kindle, paperback, as well as hardback. And my previous four books. So that's Knockdown Set Straight, Empire Builder, Leading Lady Legacy, and Leading Through Living.
Well, we want to let people know that we encourage people to click on the URLs of the guests that we have on the show, and you click on that, and you can get into all the books that you've written, and that's really cool. Good way to start with every person that we talk to is a deeper dive by clicking on their URL. Want to also let people know that we are a featured podcast on the Newsly platform. So if you listen on Newsly, see that icon up there, and if you use coupon code for our listeners tonight, Ghost, you can get 1 month free premium subscription. So we want to get into the heart of what we're going to talk about today. We've got your topic, the keys to living a life full of peace, joy, and fulfillment. And
Yes.
we can kind of start there because you're an intuitive business coach.
Yep.
You have a award-winning law firm and publishing house, and you're a CPA and ordained thought minister. You have a lot of hats, and so, like, which book do you want to start with? Your latest book, The Ultimate Successful Life with Peace, Joy, and Fulfillment. Is that the book that you want to talk about tonight?
That is the one. Live Life on Fire, the ultimate guide to a successful life full of peace, joy, and fulfillment. So I wrote this book as a culmination of realization that I had to stop living for stuff, that there had to be some other definition of what success meant. And I wrote it not just for me, but for people like me, which is almost everybody that I talk to, Phantom, right? Because most of us were encouraged by, it seems like, the same loving community. We were told that if we worked hard, that we would get a good job and we would make money and we would buy all the things we ever wanted and live happily ever after. Well, the problem was ever after never stayed, not for any of us, right? Because we get the things that we say that we want: house, car, clothes, money. But then at some point, we're like, but what else is there? And so then we work hard again, we make money again, and then we get more stuff again, and then we're not happy. So it's not really happiness that we're trying to get to. What we're trying to get to is joy. And
Mm-hmm.
I got to that realization because I had a beautiful life, Phantom. I really did. I had wonderful parents, community support system, married to a wonderful man, beautiful daughter, right? And I have achieved everything pretty much that I put my mind to. The problem came because I learned to define those successes and the things that came with them as part of my self worth and value. And so I got to a place where I would do just about anything to hear somebody say, "Oh, Lynita, you're just so fantastic. I'm just so happy to have you as part of my team, working with me on the board," or whatever it was, right? And I was working nonstop. And it didn't matter when my hair started falling out. And I'm not talking about like breaking off. I'm talking about there were clumps. I just
Mhm.
covered it up with wigs. I kept going even when my nails split. I just covered that up with beautiful acrylics. I mean, I was blinged out, right? And it did not register with me that I had to make a life change until literally my 6 year old daughter at the time found me passed out in the middle of the floor from exhaustion. And was too tired to get up. And so she put a blanket over me and kissed me on the forehead goodnight and put a pillow under my head and said, "Good night, mommy." And the only thing I had strength to do was to say, "Good night, baby." And I would love to tell you that that was the pivotal moment and that everything shifted and changed. But that's not true. And for most folks that I talk to, it doesn't work that way. It is a shift in mindset that has to occur and it takes time. And for me, it took a couple of years. And it wasn't until I was diagnosed with stage 4 endometriosis and had fibroids the size of grapefruits and was bleeding through my clothes that I realized that I had to get external help, that this was not something that I could handle for me. And so I hired a performance
Mhm.
coach and we made a list of everything that I was involved in. And Phantom, it was 7 pages, single space. And she was like, "We got to get this down to two."
Mhm.
If you're serious
Yeah.
about making a change, this is the change. We have to scale this down. And so, step one in that successful life full of peace, joy, and fulfillment was to actually have time to be peaceful, joyful, and fulfilled. And so that meant that there were things that, although I loved to do, and that were all positive, because at this point in my life, I was not fooled up with anything that was messy or caused me drama, right?
Mhm.
But it was not necessarily in line with who I was, what I was, or how I served. So, therefore, my life purpose. And so those things had to go, which then led to the second thing. How do we then define what success means? And so that took a little longer to come up with because it required me to go back to the beginning of how I learned about success. And like most of us, we were given someone else's list and said, "Here, achieve this and check off these boxes, and you're going to be good to go." And so I was like, "Well, this is not my list. So that means I need to create my own list."
Mhm.
And so that's what I did. And so I shifted from living a perfect life, which was somebody else's standard and checking somebody else's boxes, to living an excellent one. And that was creating my own list, my own standard, and giving myself grace for that standard to shift. So that's the next thing we have to do. We have to give ourselves grace, because what's excellent now in my 40s isn't going to be so in my 60s, and it surely wasn't in my 20s, right? That is going to
Mhm.
change over time, which then led to, okay, now we've got that. So what is it? What are the things that make you now feel successful? And for me, it was peace. So actually being good with just being by myself and being silent and not being all over the place and busy. And as entrepreneurs and small business owners, we are taught, at least initially, we have to be on the ready. We have to say yes to everything, because, boy, that one room that we're not in, that's going to be the one. If we're not there, we're
Yeah.
going to miss it, right?
Mhm.
And to release that, because it's not true. What's for us is for us, and it will come when it's supposed to. Then joy, finding things that were internal, because joy is an inside job. So from shifting from happiness, which was experimental and experiential, it meant coming within and deciding, what are the things that I am grateful for? What are the things that, no matter what is going on, I can tap within and still feel the euphoria from those things, from those thoughts, those feelings? And then fulfillment. And I pause here because many people think, Phantom, that fulfillment is just being satisfied and just laying down and saying, "Okay, I made it. That's it." But that's not it. Fulfillment is actually being joyful, peaceful, and loving with everything that you have right now, but still being able to see that there is more to do, more to have,
Yeah.
more to enjoy, more to share, you know? So that's
Yeah. It's
how
like
this
you're
book
never
came to
done.
be.
Well, I
Exactly.
think,
No.
yeah. But a lot of people think when I get this material thing, then I'm going to be satisfied. If I get this certificate, then I'm going to be satisfied. If I fill this room, I'll be satisfied. But then they're not. And they keep on finding more things to do. And being a poet and a songwriter, one thing I learned is the space between the notes and then
Yes.
also the quiet. Like if when I'm a creator, like you can see all my synthesizers and keyboards behind me.
Oh,
Sometimes
yeah.
it's important to like not hear the noise, to actually
Mhm.
have the quiet. And sometimes I'll walk out of this room and go. I live in New Hampshire and go out in the pines and take a walk on a trail, river trail, not be connected and kind of just let nature be the cathedral, right? And I
Yes.
feel that sometimes it's at that peace and meditation and breathing exercises and things that disconnect you from all the noise and all the alerts and all the pings that people are
Yes.
giving you. That a lot of times that I've talked to artists, a lot of artists, they say when I wasn't planning, when I wasn't like in a hyper state touring or having all these engagements, my big best ideas came when there was quiet and it wasn't frenetic, that I was able to kind of have peace and something came to me and I was a channel and I could feel it. And I feel like the people in their lives can find that kind of peace and we all can
Yes.
kind of connect to that if they're willing to not be on that train of
That's
noise
right.
and connections. I think I understand what you're saying with the way you found it.
I like your analogy being on the train because this really is a journey. You get on and it just continues. And your joy is going to come from loving the countryside, loving the changes as they come. Because there's no 2 points that are exactly the same as you're going through this life.
I also feel that there's a tendency today for perfection. And I'm old school. I'm a child of the 70s.
Oh, yeah.
And so I use a lot of old school things that aren't
Yeah.
perfect,
Yes.
right? And so you actually have to play it. You can't sample it. You can't cut it. You can't AI it. You have to actually just put it down. And it could have microtonal errors or happy accidents or a little off key. But that's the nature of being a musician is like you let it be. And it's not always perfect. And a lot of
Yes.
times it's the happy accident or the thing that's a little different that actually in jazz that like guys like Miles Davis and Herbie Hancock talk about it is kind of this living in the moment, being present, and then
Yes.
when that wrong note hits, it's not a wrong note, it's the next song. It's the next
Yes.
thing you could do. And a lot
Yes.
of people are spend so much time trying to correct the wrong note or thinking they're going to hit the wrong note
Hmm.
when there are no bad notes.
That's
It's
right.
how you respond to them shows people who you are. A lot of times, musicians will hit those so-called wrong notes, and you never knew they did because they were able to play it off and
Yes.
actually recover. And it's how you recover from life's bad notes that I think is how you can progress.
I totally agree. And when you were talking about perfection, um, that's part of the shifting of the standard, because perfection, if you look it up in the dictionary, it really is meeting or exceeding standards, but those standards are ones that someone else gave you. And in your analogy with these notes, even the ones that are played wrong or incorrectly, they're yours. And so that's your opportunity to create something new and a standard that is yours. And so when you're playing it off, you just created something that was unique and worthwhile to you and your experience, something that no one can ever take from you, and that will forever and always be part of who you are and how you show up in the world, which is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I think it's called the flow state. Like I talk to a lot of
Mhm.
creative people, poets, authors, musicians, painters, and you can have an intention, but a lot of times you get in this zone, in this flow state, kind of stream of consciousness, where you
Yeah.
have to trust yourself as a creative person or a human being. You trust what you are capable of. And a lot of
I,
times I find that people don't trust what they're capable of, and there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of like hesitation to present your authentic self. You think you have to clone something, like you have to clone or copy what existed before. That your original idea might be put down, or haters and people don't want it, and that's where a lot of things stay inside. They probably need to come outside.
yeah, I absolutely agree to that. And, talking about the flow state, that is actually the last section of my book, because I state in it that there are three other states that you have to get through to get to flow. And we all have them. We just might call them something different. And so for me, it was meditation, breathing, silence, the silence between the notes, right? Which then bring you into flow. And flow allows you to tap into your intuitive intelligence. And the intuitive intelligence is a state that is beyond the intellectual, which is books, the emotional, how we relate to people and situations that occur, the spiritual, our understanding of a being that is outside of us and how we relate to it, and the aggregate being all of those together. So once you are able to really tap into that aggregate, you can then move into intuition, and that allows you to go into flow. And flow appears differently depending on your profession, but it always comes from the same place. And that is a
Mhm.
place of knowing. So this is not a place of training. This is not a place of book knowledge. This is a place of walking into your spirithood, your personhood, where you just make decisions and take actions because they feel right. They just are.
Mhm.
And you are able to perform at a level that by yourself, as the human being, you never would. But in this state, I mean, it's magic. And you're able
And I think that's
to
yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah.
I think that's when people can tell their story, right? You talk about
Yes.
like I'm in business, right? I'm a software designer, and we deal with like the elevator pitch, right? And a lot of
Mhm.
times, sometimes we'll be doing something, and we had a project, and then we're supposed to do A, B, C, and then we find like E, this thing that we weren't supposed to work on. And then
Yes.
we gotta pitch it to the boss and say, hey, we're working on this, but we found this, and we think this is actually a better proposition. And then we have to make our pitch, and we hope that we can explain that sometimes that happy accident or this thing that we found out of our creativity actually is more worthwhile. And it's really about being able to communicate. And I think a lot of people in their lives have these kind of moments where
Yes.
there's something that you really should be, you know, looking at. Are you going to listen to it? Sometimes the universe gives you something and you're too scared to jump on it, or you don't know how to like, explain it to other people, and then it never happens and you kind of miss the boat. And I think a lot of times is it kind of that intuition is knowing how, I think a lot of people that really make it are able to have those moments and kind of align them and continue to progress because they can speak to that.
Yes. Absolutely yes. And when you're talking about alignment, I believe that that can happen once we get to a place of not just understanding, but being fully aware of how we want to show up in the world. And we are able to embrace that awareness when we put aside these ideas of what happiness is, what success is, because those ideas were planted there. They didn't
Mm.
come from us. And so we've got to uproot those things so that we can go forward and show up in the world the way that we always wanted to.
Yeah, you talk about like, the ideas that were kind of like given to us, I think everybody
Yeah.
wants to fit in that box. Like I
Yes.
want to be able to have the house and the family and the marriage and the successful job. And then sometimes it's like, well, is that really where you want to be? Right? Is this what you really
Right.
want to do? Like, is this
Yes.
your career as an attorney? You went and did it, then you get there and you're totally unhappy. You go into the doctors and you go into the therapist and you don't like the thing that you spent most of your life setting yourself up for.
Right.
And I run into tons of people like that, and they're like, "Well, what do I do?" It's like, well,
Right.
kind
They
of like
feel
when you're a
trapped.
kid, you got to go back to what was the thing that made you happy, and
Yes.
maybe it was something it was other than that, but you were told that this is really it. So you
Yeah.
push the other stuff down, and now you're finding like, well, I want to be an artist, or I want to go and do theater, or I want to go sail the world, I want to go, help people in another country and be into charity. And it's like, well, maybe that's not who I am now.
Yeah.
Do I have
That's
to
right.
be who I am now? Can I actually be who I want to be?
The biggest breakthrough is realizing you can do whatever you want to do. And I know that sounds really simplistic, but that is the truth because you have done what you wanted to do up to this point. You wanted to check off those boxes. At this point, it doesn't matter why. This is claiming your power back and accepting that we are exactly where we're supposed to be based on the decisions that we have made, and that those decisions, although we felt like we didn't have a whole lot of choices, we did have choices. And so once we embrace that, now we can move forward in power and then take the next step. If you're in a career that doesn't make you happy, you absolutely can change it. How do I know? I have several times. My undergrad was in accounting. I did accounting for a couple of years. It didn't suit my personality. I'm pretty outspoken and I'm outgoing and I'm not a little bean counter, you
Yes,
know what I mean?
yes, yes. Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, so I went back to law school and I've now practiced law. But even then, I was like, there's something else I feel pulled to do. And so I wrote a book and then I started speaking and then publishing other authors and then a magazine and a media company. And yes, eventually some of those things did wind down and I released them. But I have the experience of knowing that I did those things. They suited the time that they were supposed to. And then it was time to move on. And so that's what I would encourage your listeners to do as well. Honor the time that y'all had together. And then I release you in love. It's time to move on
Mhm.
to the next thing that will make my heart sing.
Well, a lot of times it's like we're very creative people. And what I
Yes.
find with creative people is that you go through phases in your creativity. You
Yes, that's
go
right.
through phases of, well, let me try this, let me try that. It's very experimental. And some people very frown on that. Like if you're a creative person, you tend to not fit the box
Yeah, yeah.
because you tend to push to the bleeding edge, which means you're not actually going to be in something that's a known thing, right? It's kind of an unknown, what we
Yes.
call like in music, going like newfound sounds.
Oh, I
Like
like
newfound
that.
sounds are like idea of some new type of sound, a new type of genre. Like
Yeah.
when bebop switched to like fusion or funk is an amalgamation of like psychedelia and R&B, and these are things that cross.
Yeah.
So you get cross pollination and it becomes something, and purists will go and say, well, that's not it. Like jazz people say, well, bebop is jazz and fusion is not.
Yeah.
And so people will try to tell you not to do it.
Yeah.
And a lot of times in your life, it's like, well, if I feel fusion, that's where I'm going to go.
That's
And if
right.
I go out of that, I'm going to go into hip hop, or I'm going to go to EDM, or I'm going to go to trance, I'm going to go to whatever. It's whatever suits the material. A lot of times as an artist, it's like whatever suits the material. This song suits a Steinway. This one suits like a Les Paul, or I'm going to use like an ARP or whatever. I'm going to use whatever serves the song.
That's
And it
right.
doesn't mean I'm
Yes.
gonna do what I did before. I'm gonna do something maybe I don't really know how to do, but I know I need to do it to get there.
Yes.
And I
That's
think
right.
that type of mindset is the artist mindset is kind of like I believe that art mindset is in a lot of people, but they've been told they can't do it because
Hmm.
you have to be Beethoven, you have to be Prince, you have to be Hendrix, you have to be somebody. But you don't. You can be you.
When you're saying you can be you, it makes me think about something that we've all heard, the every cloud has a silver lining, right? So I look at that cloud as an opportunity for us to rise up and be a better version of ourselves. And I look at the silver lining on that cloud, that's us. So every challenge, disappointment, even anxiety, yes, it's a cloud, but that is also an opportunity for us to create something new, to love ourselves better, to embrace what is before us so that we can grow to the next great thing that's before us. I think life is ever evolving and that it's always expanding and that we have to evolve and expand to meet the moment.
Well, I think diversity is very important because I think sometimes we've been given these very homogenous, patterned
Mm,
structures,
absolutely.
canons, and we're told this is the canon, this is the best.
Yeah. Oh,
But
yeah.
what if somebody wants to be a modern day Mozart or somebody wants to go push in art and be better than Monet or better than this, better than that?
Mhm.
But you don't have to be just replicating the past. You don't have to just sample what existed or use AI to find the best prompt on something that was learned, which is something that was already existing. The
Yes.
idea that like today we have a problem because of social media, that just because I get a billion likes or a billion views doesn't mean it's good. A lot of times, the thing that doesn't get the most views is actually artistically more impressive. And so the problem is we get stuck into the popularity contest, which doesn't actually mean that it's right just because people like it doesn't mean it's right. Doesn't
True.
mean it's the best. Doesn't mean and that's a problem because we get into this mathematical model and everybody thinks it's because of the number that means it's okay or it's better.
And that goes back to the point of these external motivations, right? When we are looking at these numbers, we're happy when we've had 1,000 likes, 1,000,000 views. Then does that mean that we're sad when it was only 5 likes, 50 views? What about being grateful that we had a platform to put forth our art and that there are plenty of people who enjoy it and that share it gratefully? That is the difference and the nuance between this happiness and joy. I read this statistic that said that 78% of people are willing to pay to feel happy, and it was not until I ran across a person just last week who I was trying to get her to understand that these experiences that you've paid for, that is not joy because it's unsustainable. If you lose your job and you're not able to pay for these experiences of being in the mountains and things anymore, then that means that you're not joyful. So that's happiness. And
Mhm.
I couldn't get her there. And I was just like, it will, but Phantom, I'm telling you, it didn't make me angry or frustrated when she was dismissive about it because I was like, you'll get there in your own time. In
Yeah.
your own
It's
time.
something people have to find because, like I
Mhm.
said, I live in New Hampshire. I can just walk in the pines, and nature is the cathedral is a famous like Victorian poem. But the idea is I really feel it
But Phantom,
because I
let's
go
say that you couldn't walk outside. Could you
well then
still find that place of joy? Could you get there?
because I like poetry, and it came from a poem. In the
And
poem,
that
I
was
have
in your heart.
That was
that was
already in my
inside.
heart because it
There
was
you
like a
go.
poem that I read that and I believed it, and I can physically walk there. But
Yes.
like art in itself, just being able to listen to Stevie Wonder's Intervisions or songs
Mhm.
in the key of life, right? As long as if I can hear that, or even if I could read the lyrics or read a, any of the great poetry from the Harlem Renaissance, art always kind of drives me.
Yeah.
So a lot of times art is free. You can go to the library, you can access it. You can get it off the net for free.
Yes.
You can go
Yeah.
listen to things. You don't have to have money. And
Yeah.
so if you can get and also like meditation and
Yes.
breathing exercises and calming yourself and thinking, in a spiritual way where you start to connect. I'm a Buddhist, so connecting and reading, my Buddhist literature and just these are free things. These are things like
Yes.
meditation, breathing exercises, point of my state of mind, quiet.
Mhm.
These are things that don't
Always.
cost you any money. And
That's
if
right.
you and you can get a lot of peace out of it rather than having to go to the White Mountains and hike the White Mountains. It's going to cost you some money to do that.
Oh, yeah.
Go, yeah, I agree with that. You can do this inside yourself.
That's right.
And if you can do those things inside before you go outside,
Yeah.
because a lot of people like if you can fix the inside, you can fix the outside. You can know how to deal with it, and so it's like a two-way street. Like everything's holistic. So there's multiple pillars to life, and there's a microcosm, there's a macrocosm, there's your internal, there's the external. There's a lot of things. A lot of people just want to fix one thing, but then they realize, yeah, you're connected to everything. And so you've got to
Yes.
kind of see the overall picture. And I think a lot of people miss the boat. They think this magic thing's going to fix everything. Usually, one thing's not going to fix everything. There's a lot of legs to it, and it's incremental. If you can
That's
get 1%
yes.
better every day instead of trying to 100%, goes 0 to 100. That's the problem. If you try to go 0 to 100, you're gonna have a problem. If you can get
Agreed.
happy with incremental changes, then you can be more sustainable.
Yes. That's exactly right. And I love what you said about going from 0 to 100 and trying to accomplish it in 24 hours. Weight loss is like that. If you do about a pound or two a week, it's sustainable and it is highly unlikely that you'll just go balloon up again later. But the times where I've just like, I'm going to lose 60 pounds in a week, that's when it all just goes to pot.
Yeah, yeah, it's not gonna work.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. Yeah, everybody tries to finish something fast,
Yeah.
and even like like I'm in design, and we get these deadlines from managers, and we told them it's like you can want it by the deadline. But we live in a world where incremental agile development. So we can
Yeah.
so-called give you everything day one, but it's really gonna be day two to day 100 where it really gets realized, where most of that stuff's gonna probably show up on version 2.5, not
Yes.
version one.
That's right.
And so if you tell people everything's gonna be there on version one, that's not the truth. so so that's the problem. Sometimes people want to say that version one's gonna have 100 everything. It's usually like it's going to be incremental. Like you're good, everything's incremental. It's over time, and if it usually doesn't happen day one. So that's the problem. We have a society that wants it right now. They want everything right now. Everything's got to be instant gratification. Got to be perfect. And I'm kind of into that happy accident. I'm into the less perfect world. I find a lot of beauty in imperfection. And people are like, "Well, what's that? Well, how can that be?" Well, because if you listen to art, you look at music, you look at a lot of old school things, even like books from the past.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that are imperfect, but that
Yes.
makes it beautiful. And people
Yes.
are so into trying to make something perfect, like, well, you're actually taking all the beauty out of it.
Yeah, and the grace as well, right? Because if we're sitting here trying to be perfect and have everything in its place all the time, then there is no there's no opportunity for grace for anybody else or for ourselves. And so when something happens, it all falls apart. It's not just this one part. You know, as lawyers, we create these contracts, right? And there's normally what we call a severability clause. And what it means is that if any of the other 50,000 clauses that are there in the contract fails, for being no longer practical or impossible or it's now illegal, that the rest of the contract stands up. So it's built in understanding that we're not perfect. Well, what if we had that same kind of clause in our lives? That's what we're talking
Mhm.
about when we're talking about grace, to be
Yeah,
able to
grace.
just take that one thing and say, okay, it's not perfect, it's not working out, but it doesn't mean that I'm horrible. It just means
Yeah.
that in this area, I need some more work.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's like I like when I talk about music, it's like takes. And the
Yeah,
idea concept of music in the past, like Elton John, everybody knows him. He said that Yellow Brick Road, the album, everything's like third,
yeah,
fourth take, and everything today is like a hundredth take. And
yeah,
he said there was something about the grace of being able to release something on the third or fourth take and then not touching it again, saying, "Well, that's what it is." That's a
yes,
point in time. That's what this song is, and a lot of times it was closer to the truth of what the songwriters really wanted to do. That
agreed.
the further you get from the take, like you go to take 99, you started to second guess yourself. You start taking things out. You start saying, "Oh, I don't know if I really want to say that. I don't know if I really want to play that." And then it goes away from what the original idea the universe kind of gave you
Yes,
is now been altered because you kept on second guessing it to the point where you ruined it.
yeah.
And a
You
lot
know,
of times it's like the original piece is
mm-hmm.
so much better. And today we live in a world where the original pieces are usually not being shown. We're
Yeah,
seeing way down the line monster revisions that I'm like, it doesn't feel like anything to me.
but I'm gonna tell you, I am encouraged though. I am seeing more and more actors being very firm about not allowing their entire being to be just whitewashed and
Yeah.
changed into like perfection. Like I was watching Blue Beetle today with my husband, and we I noticed the lead character who plays Jaime, that his teeth are a little crooked. And it just made me so happy because I'm just like, that's a normal person's mouth. And not
Yeah,
having
it
these
wasn't.
chompers that are just like all
Yeah,
even
fake, yeah,
and they're all
yeah.
white. And I just like,
That's not
oh
a
my
real
gosh,
person. It doesn't
no,
look like
it's
a real person.
not. No,
Yeah, well,
not
that's
at
the
all.
problem. Like, a lot of times it's like we get these perfect images, like influencers. And a
Yes,
lot of our teenage kids have been a lot of parents have complained about the internet and influencers and body shaming and
yes,
certain things where young girls and boys are being kind of body shamed by these professional influencers. They, well, this is the ideal, and then people aren't allowed to be who they are. And I
and
think that that's where it's dangerous when you get to these kind of archetypal things that people want. That's the standard. Like we can't have anything else, and I'm like that's a problem.
I totally agree. And it's interesting because what you just described was keeping up with the Joneses. And I think it must have been about 6 or 7 years ago. I did this keynote in South Carolina, and I told them, I was like, "Do you know what I found out about the Joneses? The Joneses were people who there were two sets. One set where they had everything, and that's where the term comes up, keeping up with the Joneses, right?
Mhm.
But then it was who the Joneses were trying to keep up with. They still had somebody that they were trying to meet, and you just
Keep up
like."
with, yeah.
Yeah, so when does this end? When does this stop, y'all, right?
You don't stop.
No. So
And
these
then you do like
influencers,
things that
it's
are
not even real.
yeah, but it's like meaningless. It's like you go out and you look at what's getting a million hits or a billion views.
Yeah,
They're all using the same song. So
right.
like millions of posts using the same song. So like from the cat video to the prank video. to
Yes.
whatever video, they're all using the same song. So what meaning is that? Like you're so trying to be popular that you're all cloning the same thing for the same
Yes.
30 seconds, 60 seconds, 90 seconds. And then being a creative person, and I've talked to other people who are kind of, from the 60s or 70s, and we're looking at this like, well, how is that? What is that? And I understand the kids got different tastes, but the
Yeah.
problem I have is they're not being exposed to individuality. They're being exposed to something that's trying to create these standards that are
Mhm.
kind of like meaningless. They don't really
Yeah.
add anything.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that is kind of mind numbing. And so
Yeah.
when you're trying to be creative, what I try to push is like pushing the left and right brain to be at the bleeding edge of creativity, which
Yes.
means you kind of get to a fearless state. But if you're just cloning and copying what's popular, you're not trying to be fearless. You're not trying to be original. You're just trying
Right.
to belong. That's a
Right.
different thing.
And we try to belong when we are afraid. And we have to get to a place where we don't pretend like fear is not a true and constant thing in the world that we have created, because we have created a system to ensure that those who step too far out of the lines are punished, either by being ostracized or by being ridiculed or by being impoverished, and sometimes all of the above.
Mhm.
But even in seeing that, there is a certain beauty and opportunity to tap into our uniqueness, to bring that to the world, because we were each created for a reason. And it wasn't, to your point, to make the same video over and over again, because that's what we're doing. And I want to be clear, I'm not poo-pooing on the people who do it, right? I watch the videos too and I laugh too. But then I go back to work. I go back to doing the thing that I know that I was placed here to do, to uplift, inspire, and transform. And so if you can't say that that work is, it's doing that, then understand that that's a hobby. And there's nothing wrong with hobbies, but that's not your calling. That's not your purpose. That's not why you're here. And if you're still looking for it, that's cool, but it's probably not going to be found in the cat video.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, the whole thing about diversity is like, there's I was one time in an organization, being an African American, I'm like, I had this executive telling me that, oh, you can have diversity of thought. You don't have to have diversity in ethnicity. You can have just diversity of thought. And I'm like, okay, like I'm the only guy who looks like this, like me here. So you're telling me you guys could not have me here and you could have diversity of thought and that's okay.
So I'm
so
gonna
so
challenge you on that, Phantom, right? So I have been in situations where I was the only, and particularly when I was younger, right? And I did not feel comfortable voicing my thoughts, my feelings, my impressions on the things that I saw, and I was quiet. Or I said something that went along with the prevailing view because I didn't want to be ostracized, ridiculed, and then eventually let go, and so I would be impoverished, right? So in those rooms, diversity did not really happen, because just because I'm chocolate and y'all are vanilla, that does not really create
yeah,
diversity.
yeah, that's what I was kind of getting at. Cause
Yeah.
like, cause I pointed out that, what I was trying to go and tell them is like diversity of thought, like really you have diversity of thought. What if I say, something about like we're not really serving multiple communities because we don't have enough diversity in this room to understand those markets
Correct.
because nobody's comfortable actually checking that out because they're all in the same group, they're all in the same club. Do they even know anybody in that area?
Yeah.
Right. So I got sent to Japan to because I was willing to kind of voice that I wanted to try different things and I
Yes.
wanted to be more accepting of things. So I was one of these guys that went there and didn't want to just insert American business practices into the Japanese market. I
Yes.
actually looked at what the Japanese were doing, and I told the executives like, we can't just force the Japanese to do what we do in Simsbury, Connecticut. That's not going to work. This market is a totally different market. You can't really do what we do here. You have to understand the Japanese customer.
That's right.
And if you don't really, you can't just like say, well, we're American, they're going to love everything we do. It's like that doesn't work. um, but yeah, it had to be in this mindset to challenge what they were going to do because they were. If I hadn't said that, they were just going to try to carbon copy what they were doing in the U.S. and do it there,
That's right.
which wasn't going to work. But
That's right.
that's the problem. Sometimes it's like having somebody with a diverse point of view can bring opportunities to the people who think maybe that doesn't. And I think
But
there's so many closed-minded people that say, well, you can't have anybody because you're not going to get any progress because you're just helping them out. They're
agreed.
not going to bring anything to the table.
And to have true diversity, there has to be ebb and flow. I have to believe that I have something to share and teach you, but also be open to receive it and to learn. And
Yeah,
what many organizations miss is that they think that because they've set up these programs and they have these chief diversity officers that they are addressing something, but mindset has not shifted. You've learned nothing. You don't
yeah,
go into any of these communities. You've not joined any of the organizations. You have not made any attempt to mentor, develop, coach, or any of the other beautiful words and terms that we've created to help somebody who does not look like you, live where you live, serve where you serve. Then your diversity objectives are not being achieved. And I'm going to tell you, those companies who don't get it, they are going to be left on the sidelines because not only this country, but the world is becoming browner.
yeah,
And that's just the truth of what is happening here. And if you're not willing to learn, to share, to grow in your understanding of how other people experience life, then you're going to be left behind. One of the reasons that I chose the seminary that I did, Kairos Institute for Progressive Spiritual Study, is because of the study of all the major religions. We
mhm,
studied Christianity, yes, but we spent a lot of time on Buddhism and Hinduism and the Jains and the Sikhs and Islam and Judaism because there are huge segments of the world who
yeah,
practice these religions.
yeah. The whole market's like if you're just coming from one point of view, this is kind of what I was trying to tell the people when I was working that they were coming from this kind of Western mindset that was
Hmm.
maybe one type of religion, right? And not understanding in Japan, Buddhism and Shintoism, other types of Eastern culture and different mindsets in terms of what is what will work in that market, the
Yes,
understanding of how people think. And it's different mindsets from different perspectives. If you have a Buddhist point of view or a Shinto point of view, you have a different mindset than a Christian point of view. That's just what it
absolutely.
is.
That's
And
right.
if you come in there thinking that you can do what you do here, there, it's a lack of understanding. You can actually,
Yes.
they make people not want to deal with you
Yes.
because
Yep.
it's blatant. And when it's blatant, it's like you don't even get it because they're very polite and they won't
And
tell
you
you.
don't care to get it. So it's
You wouldn't
disrespectful.
get it.
So you didn't even
Yeah, yeah.
try.
You didn't even try to do
You didn't even
it.
try. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the world is so global that
Yeah.
you just because it works in the East Coast, well, is that the only place you're gonna sell to, or you're gonna sell to the whole world, right? You have to have an idea. You you have to have the mindset that like your whatever service or product you're providing can actually reach the whole globe now. So if you have a very narrow point of view and you don't have any insight into how other people live, you are not designing products you're only designing for the products for the people that you know,
Hmm.
not products for the whole world.
That's
And
right.
that's where, you have to have very diverse teams. I happen to have the benefit of working with very diverse teams. in software design from all over the world. We work with lots of people from different parts of the world, and we get different perspectives
Yes.
because of that. And we learn all the time because of the different
Yes.
perspectives. And I think people who are in very narrow areas where they don't see anybody else, where they only see people that look like them or people think like them, I don't think you can progress in a multicultural global world in that mindset. I think you have to be willing to have an open mind that goes two ways, not just one way.
That's right. That's exactly right.
But I think there's one term you were talking about: burn down the old and building the new.
Hmm.
Um, do you feel like you have to like burn it down in some cases, or is it some more something that doesn't? Well, I think certain things you do have to totally kind of reimagine and get out of.
And
And
I
I guess it's
thank you
maybe
so
like
much
is
for.
a case by case scenario.
So, first, I have to thank you for that verbiage that you use, because this is not like burning as in destroying, right? This is shift in the mindset. Because if you think you're going to do this work and then go back to the life that you had and that everything is going to conform to you, like what you were talking about with diversity, that is absolutely not going to happen. Once you have had this shift in how you learn, how you share, how you grow, how you serve, right? Then your life is not going to make sense to you or anybody else who knows you and have seen this shift. It's not going to make sense anymore. Things have to change. Some things have to go. And that is the burning away. So if it's no
Mhm.
longer consistent with how you show up in the world, your purpose in life, your mission, your vision, your values, those things have to go. I understand that they're positive. I understand that they're great networking opportunities. I get that you founded the organization, been there, done that, got the t shirt. What I'm saying is they don't serve you now. And now is the
Yeah.
only moment that matters, because if you're not good for now, tomorrow it might as well not come, because you're in no position to meet it. And so
Mhm.
when we're talking about burning down the old and making room for the amazing, it means clearing the field. People who grow anything, they garden, they have a herb plant center in their kitchen. If you've ever farmed, it is a process of clearing the field and then
Yep.
planting seeds and then cultivating and stirring up the soil, watering it, and then it can come. But first, things have to be removed. Nothing can happen until things are removed.
Yeah. It's like I have in my studio, I have these old 1970 synthesizers,
Yeah.
and you have to put the wires together like a telephone operator
Yeah.
to come up with the sounds.
Hmm.
And at the beginning of a project, I'll just take all the wires out and start from scratch. So which means it's
Okay.
not going to make any sound until I have to rework everything and
Yeah.
create whole new patches of sound design.
Yeah.
So I take pictures of the old if I ever want to come back to it, but I have to actually take everything and go back to square one and start
Mm.
all over again. And what it does is it creates like this kind of new world, because like the last song was this world of sound, and the new song is the new world. And every
Yes.
time you start, you come from a different place, and there's millions of combinations. You have no idea. It's like a painting. You start mixing colors, and we call it sound painting. And different things start to collide and come up with new sounds from the colorization of the waveforms. And so I'm very much into that. But it's a very kind of point in time place. A lot of these compositions can't be recreated exactly. They when they get created, they're like that's what it was for that moment. And some people don't like that. They want to have something digital that they can recall note for note exactly the way they did it.
Yeah.
I'm more into
Yeah.
like I'll let it be that point in time sound painting which I can't necessarily recreate. I let it go. It's like, well, I'm not going to try to recreate that. I'm going to do something new. And that
Yes.
is a different type of mindset. And a lot of people don't like that because they're like, I need to have the comfort that I can recreate it note for note what I did before.
Yes. Yes. And it's interesting because when we can't tap into our own power and authority, that's when we get sucked back into wanting to replicate these other notes. But life isn't meant to live in the past. There's this song, those were the best days of my life, because he's
Hmm.
talking about high school, and I'm like, how sad is that?
Yeah,
You
you're
are
still talking
still
about that.
you're
Still,
still
still talking
talking
about
about that. Oh my
that.
gosh, what? Those are the best days of your life and you're in your 40s and your 50s?
I didn't do so
No.
good in high school. I do better now. Like that's the
Yes.
problem. When you meet people like their best days were their high school prom days.
Just
I'm
like,
like,
oh,
that was
you
like
got
my worst time. I do way better now.
I can't say that. I was Miss
That's
High School. I loved it. I'm
I
in my
wasn't.
high school Hall of Fame, but I still love my life, and my best days are now. They are ahead. I can't do
Yeah.
that.
Some people
God.
like to get caught in that groundhog hog day, mindset. Like they
Yes,
keep on wanting to
right?
go back to this moment of
Yes.
like their like peak moment.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, if that's your peak moment, it's like what are you gonna do with the rest of your life? Because like
Yeah.
there's a lot of other things coming down the pike. And if that's the only thing that excites you, that's kind of sad to me because like there's a
Yes.
lot of things, I'm a cancer survivor. And so every day that I get up, I'm happy that I'm here.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
if I was like thinking about like my best days with it, well, my best day is the next day, or the day after that. I don't know. I'm going to keep on pushing. And I think it's like that kind of mindset, is hard because everybody's trying to be so into the box. Everybody's trying to be so, I got to be this, I got to be that. Other people's expectations, like you said at the beginning. How
Mhm.
can you actually like, kind of reframe your life to be, you know, who you are, being like a authentic, actualized person, doing what you feel, not doing what somebody else set the roadmap for you. You set the roadmap yourself.
Yeah, so I actually have a blueprint for that, the Live Life on Fire blueprint. And when I give them to you, it's going to sound really simple. It's the implementation, just like anything else, it takes work. So the first thing is we have to focus on the people or the person in front of us and not the process. Sometimes we get so caught up in doing everything exactly the way that we were taught to do, that we learned to do, and that may have worked on the person right before, that we forget that the person in front of us is here for a purpose, that there is supposed to be an exchange, a flow of learning, of experience, right? When we embrace that moment to know that there is something that was supposed to be exchanged, and it might not resonate with us immediately, it might take a few days, but if we treat the person across from us with all the dignity, respect, and attention, the mindfulness that we can, then we get what we're supposed to out of that experience, and we don't have to play Groundhog Day, as you so eloquently stated, right? The second thing is we have to get to a place where we are willing to leave it all on the field. Um, I very much admire most guys. They go out, they do their best, they get in a fight, and then it's over, right? I have had to learn that skill because a lot of times I would hold things in, and that is what manifested as illness, is dis-ease, disease, right?
Mm.
Um, I got to a place, and I tell people this: you have done the best that you could with what you had in the moment. And when it's done, it's done. Now, this is not to say don't go over it to reevaluate, to see places of improvement. I'm saying don't dwell on it. Once you've done that evaluation and review, take the good stuff, tweak the stuff that you would like, and then move on. Because
Hmm.
getting stuck there, it's going to drag you down. The third thing, which is related, is we've got to unstretch ourselves thin. Most of us are involved in way too much. You have work, you have your community service, you have your civic engagements. Many of us have our religious organizations that we're involved in. We have family commitments, and then we leave ourselves last. Well, I need you to flip that around and put yourself first. And I know that sounds selfish, but hear me out, please. If you are not healthy, if you do not have good mental acuity, if your emotional state stays bankrupt, you can't be good for anybody else.
Hmm.
You got to be good for you, and then you can go out into the world and you stay good for you by consistently and constantly evaluating how you spend your time, with whom you spend your time, and then making changes as needed. The next thing that we do is we live a model life. And that model life is not for everybody else. It's great that they see it and that they're inspired by it and that they'll come and ask you what you're doing. Absolutely. But we're doing this for us so that we can be strong for our families, our communities, and everyone else. And it is a life that is built on excellence, not perfection, so that it can change over time, depending on what we're going through at that time. And so that's the blueprint.
I think that's a very plan. I try to. I think I'm in that kind of mindset where I try to live in a flow state where
Yeah.
I kind of trust my intuition and kind of go with the flow. I'm
Hmm.
not into total perfection. I'm more into like just trying to be excellent, trying to do the best I can do. And like you have a lesson learned, like you said, you look at something and then you progress, but you don't obsess about past, idiosyncrasies or what you perceive to be failures.
Yeah.
You learn and you go forward. And a lot of if you can get out of the kind of resentment of the past mistake to the point of embracing the future, embracing the present. And I think it also was important, like you said, you listen, like listening skills in an age like, are you thinking about the response to somebody while while they're talking? You're thinking about what you're going to say back to them instead of listening to what they're saying.
Yes,
And a lot of
absolutely.
people
Yes.
are thinking about the next couple of things they're going to respond to instead of actually really listening to what the person is actually saying.
Yeah, that's right.
But I want to thank you again for being on the Family Liquid Ghost podcast. We actually hit the hour mark. It always goes by so quick. And
I know.
it's just something I love to do. We've been podcasting for a while, and we're going to continue to do this as long as we love to do it, and we still love doing it. So I want to thank you for being a guest on the podcast. We'll be fully published tomorrow. We are on YouTube and Twitch. We had an issue with the Facebook feed live, but that will be republished to Facebook, so you'll get a new link for that.
Okay.
But thank you very much for being on the podcast, and I appreciate it. Have a good night.
Thank you, Phantom. I appreciate you.